Hey everyone, on this Great Lakes prepping video I wanted to talk a little bit about my food preservation tools of the trade. When I first started getting into the whole prepping thing, had no idea just how deep the rabbit hole could go. It didn't take long before I graduated from just buying extra canned soups and things like that to where I was running a mini scale food preservation operation in my house. So over the last few years I've accumulated a lot of gadgets and tools. Some are just fun, some make it easier, and some are absolutely vital if you're going to prepare and preserve food for medium to long-term storage. So let's go through some of the equipment. Of course, we have the Konasana Mason Jar. I might argue the most important single piece of food preservation equipment. I have many of these jars in my home right now. But let's just start at the end here. First we've got, well, we'll start here. The food mill. Come fall, all my tomatoes have been picked and I'm ready to process them down into sauce or whatever else I'm going to do to them. And this is one of the first steps. If you don't have a food mill and you do tomatoes, I highly recommend getting something like this. There's a couple of different styles. I happen to like this kind. It runs everything through a fine mesh. All the good stuff comes out here and drains into a container. All the seeds and crap and pulp that you don't want come out here into a different bowl. Pretty cool. And of course, I've adapted this to work with a power drill, which is the same thing I did to my grain mill, which I actually showed in a different video altogether. Now, this isn't necessarily used too much in food preservation, but I thought I'd show it here anyway because I do a lot of storing of grain, wheat berries and other grains, and this comes into play when it's time to use those things. But anyway, we'll move on. I already talked about the mason jar. For greater quantities of things, of course, you got the 5-gallon bucket. I don't happen to have any Mylar bags or oxygen absorbers right now, so I'm not going to talk too much about that. I'm fresh out. I got to buy some more, but if you want a whole lot of something, the 5-gallon bucket's the way to go. I tend to break things down in smaller quantities, and I just really like mason jars. There's something just clean and pure about something that's all glass. I can seal it several different ways. I don't have to ever worry that oxygen absorbers aren't working or they're no longer activated or anything like that. Moving on, I'm going to skip over a little bit here. We got the food processor. This thing, of course, isn't a must-have, but it can sure make things easier, especially since I've been getting into dehydrating. If you have a whole lot of potatoes and you need to chop them all up, this thing's the way to go. Onions, really any fresh vegetables at all. This thing just makes such quick work out of anything I put in it. This is just a fun little vegetable peeler that I picked up in the spirit of hand-operated, non-electric gadgets. I really like this little thing. Stick a potato or an apple on the end of here. Turn this thing. I don't have it suctioned down to the table here. Turn this thing and it runs across the little peeler. It's pretty cool. It does a nice job, and it saves my fingers from a lot of aching that a normal handheld peeler might have me suffer through. Over here we got, of course, the hot water canning pot. Good for tomatoes or fruits with a lot of acid, but didn't take me long before I graduated up to his big brother, the pressure canner, which you need for meats and all sorts of other vegetables and things, where to get them sanitary and sealed without any risk of botulism or any of that good stuff. You actually have to get the temperature inside hotter than that of boiling water, so you got to have the pressure canner to do that. Over here, of course, we have the food saver with the jar attachment. This thing has been just invaluable. I can't even tell you how much I've used this thing. Obviously, using a food saver with the jar attachment is no substitution for hot water bath or pressure canning, but if you're talking about purely dried goods, you can seal them up in a mason jar with one of these things, and it's awesome. I have countless jars full of dried vegetables and grains and rice, of course, anything you can think of. If you don't have a food saver, well, they're pretty awesome even for sealing up the bags that this thing was sort of designed for. But if you get one, spend the extra $10 and get one of these mason jar attachments. I can't recommend them highly enough. All right, and then moving over here, of course, this is Big Betsy here. This is my dehydrator. I really like this thing. You just throw your stuff in it, and forget about it for many hours, and come back and you've got all the dehydrated goodies you want. I've actually got a batch going right now. I turned the machine off so I could shoot this video because it does make a little bit of noise. But you can see I got some mixed vegetables and things in here. But I'll close this back up so it doesn't lose too much of the heat that's in there. Dehydrator is great. If you don't have one and you're interested in long-term storage, that's the way to go. There's a lot of vegetables and other things you can store for just years and years, as long as you can get all that moisture out of there. Lastly, we just got the little label maker. Everything that I put in a jar or a bucket that's going to be stored for any amount of time at all gets a label with the contents of the container and, of course, the date that I sealed it. Very important to have. I'm not as worried about it for things like rice and beans and very long-term type stuff, but I mean, honestly, 10 years from now, am I going to have any memory of if I sealed up this rice 10 years ago, or was it maybe 14 years ago? I don't know that I'll have any ability to remember that. So it's just good record keeping. Goes a long way. I can't recommend having a label maker enough. Of course, you can just use a marker on the lids of your jars. That works just as fine, but I like to get a little fancy, I guess. So there you have it. There's my food preservation tools of the trade. I'm sure I'll add to this sooner or later, next time I find a gadget that I really like that can make things easier. For now, that's what we got. Let me know what you think.